Speak up, guys. In today's video, I'm going to share a simply unbelievable story. You will hear the story of Efrain Velasco, a man who went through a near-death experience that completely changed his life. During this experience, he had a shocking vision about the arrival of angels and a spiritual battle that is about to take place in September 2024. Stay until the end, because this revelation could change the way you see the world. And of course, if you like this type of content, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and activate the bell so you don't miss the next videos. Hello, my name is Efrain Velasco. I'm 24 years old and I live in Tampa, Florida. Until recently, I was what you might call a staunch skeptic. I grew up in a family where science reigned supreme. My father, Dr. Jorge Velasco, is a respected doctor here in the city, and my mother, Maria, has always supported his worldview based on facts and evidence. Since I was a child, I was taught that the answers to all questions were in science books, mathematical equations, and laboratory experiments. Religion? Well, it was seen as something for the weak, an emotional crutch for those who couldn't face the stark reality of the universe. I remember my father saying, "Efrain, there is nothing beyond what we can see, touch, and measure. The rest is imagination." And I believed it. I believed with all the strength of my being. I studied biology in college, fascinated by the complexity of life but always viewing everything through the lens of scientific materialism. God? Soul? Life after death? To me, they were just cultural constructs, nothing more than stories we tell ourselves to assuage our fear of the unknown. I had plans, you know. I wanted to follow in my father's footsteps, become a brilliant doctor, make discoveries that would change the world. My life was mapped out, clear as water. I was that confident guy who thought he had all the answers, who looked with a mix of pity and disdain at those who clung to spiritual beliefs. But then, something happened. Something that turned my world upside down, that shook the foundations of everything I believed I knew. It was an experience that made me question not only my beliefs, but the very nature of reality. It all started with a cough. It seems silly, doesn't it? A simple cough. But that cough was the beginning of a journey that would take me to the limits of life and death, and make me see a world that I never even dreamed existed. In the next few minutes, I will share my story with you. It is a story of transformation, of death and rebirth. A story that, honestly, I never thought I would be telling. But here I am, ready to reveal what happened to me, what I saw and experienced beyond the confines of what we call life. I'm not here to convince anyone. I didn't write books about it. I didn't found any groups or movements. I'm just an ordinary man who had an extraordinary experience. An experience that completely changed my worldview, and that I believe can offer a different perspective to those who are willing to listen. So, if you are ready, I invite you to embark on this journey with me. A journey that begins with a simple cough and ends, well, actually, it never really ends. Because what I discovered is that life, true life, goes far beyond what our eyes can see or our science can measure. Get ready. The story I'm about to tell may challenge everything you think you know about life, death, and what lies beyond. And who knows? Maybe, just like it happened to me, it can open your eyes to a greater reality than you ever imagined. So like I said, it all started with a cough. At first I didn't pay much attention. You know, I thought it was just a passing flu or something. But the days went by, and that dry, irritating cough just wouldn't go away. I remember sitting in the college library trying to concentrate on a paper on molecular genetics when a coughing fit took me by surprise. I coughed so much that I had to run to the bathroom, the other students' eyes following me. It was there, looking at the bathroom mirror, panting and with watery eyes, that I realized this wasn't normal. I decided to see a doctor. Not my father, of course. After all, I was already an adult and wanted to deal with this on my own. The doctor examined me, did some tests, and prescribed me some syrup. Nothing much, he said. Probably just a sore throat. But the syrup didn't work. Neither did the antibiotics that came later, nor the alternative treatments that, in a moment of desperation, I decided to try. Nothing worked. The cough persisted day after day, night after night. My life began to slowly fall apart. Sleeping became a challenge. I spent sleepless nights, sitting up in bed, trying to find a position that wouldn't trigger another coughing fit. Fatigue began to overwhelm me. My college grades started to suffer. I, who had always been an exemplary student, now could barely stay awake during classes. The worst thing was the feeling of helplessness. I, who had always believed that science had all the answers, now found myself faced with something that science could not explain or cure. I started to feel a constant pain in my chest, as if something was compressing me inside. My parents, of course, were worried. My father, with all his medical experience, couldn't understand what was happening. He took me to specialists, did tests, consulted colleagues. Nothing. No conclusive diagnosis. It was at this time that I started to notice changes in my body. I've always been an athletic guy, you know? I played football on the weekends and went to the gym regularly. But now, looking in the mirror, I saw my muscles disappearing, my face becoming thinner and paler. Frustration took over me. How was it possible that something as seemingly simple as a cough could bring my entire world down? I found myself questioning everything I believed in. If science couldn't help me, what else was there? It was in this moment of despair that my father suggested seeing a specialist in respiratory diseases. A renowned doctor, the kind you can only book an appointment with months in advance. But my father pulled some strings, and we got an appointment for the following week. I remember walking into that doctor's office like it was yesterday. The walls were lined with diplomas and certificates, the smell of antiseptic in the air. And there he was, a middle-aged man with thin-rimmed glasses, looking at me with a mixture of curiosity and concern. He examined me thoroughly, asked questions that no other doctor had asked before, and then, with a sigh, he said the words that would change my life forever. "I have medication that might help. It's strong but effective. Let's do an allergy test first, just in case." The test showed a mild reaction, but the doctor didn't seem concerned. "Nothing serious will happen," he assured me with a confident smile. I wanted to believe him, desperately. I left there with the recipe in hand and a mixture of hope and apprehension in my chest. Little did I know that this medicine would be the catalyst for an experience that would challenge everything I believed I knew about life, death, and what lies beyond. That night, lying in my bed, staring at the bottle of medicine on the bedside table, I had no idea that I was about to embark on the most extraordinary and transformative journey of my life. That night, man, sometimes I still get goosebumps just thinking about her. I was there, sitting on the edge of my bed, turning and turning that bottle of medicine in my hands. You know when you get that strange feeling, like something important is about to happen? That's exactly how I felt. Finally, I got the courage. I opened the bottle, took out a pill, and swallowed it with a sip of water. At first, nothing happened. I even thought, well, maybe it's not that strong. Man, how wrong I was. It must have been about 15 minutes later. I was lying down trying to relax when it started. First it was a buzz, quietly, almost imperceptibly, but it got bigger and bigger until it felt like there was a swarm of bees inside my head. And it wasn't just the noise. It was like my entire body was vibrating. I tried to sit up, but my body wouldn't respond. Panic started to take over me. The buzzing got so loud it felt like my head was going to explode. And then, darkness. But it wasn't like closing your eyes, you know? It was a different kind of darkness. Total. Absolute. As if I had been thrown into a bottomless pit. At that moment, I knew for sure. I was dying. All my years of skepticism, all my trust in science, none of it mattered now. I was alone, lost in that infinite void. I can't say how long I stayed in that state. It could have been minutes, hours, or even days. Time didn't make sense there. The only thing I felt was fear. A primordial, visceral fear, unlike anything I had ever experienced. I started thinking about my life. In my parents, in my friends, and all the things I still wanted to do. And for the first time in my life, I found myself thinking, What if I'm wrong? What if there's something more? It was strange. I, who had always scoffed at the idea of an afterlife, was now desperate for any sign that this wasn't the end. That's when it happened. In the midst of that oppressive darkness, I saw a point of light. Tiny at first, but it grew. It was as if someone had lit a candle at the end of a long tunnel. And that light, man, it was no ordinary light. She emanated a feeling of peace, of welcome. It was as if he was calling me. Without thinking twice, I headed towards her. I can't explain how I moved through that void, but I knew I was getting closer. The light grew stronger and brighter, and as I got closer, the fear gave way to a feeling of calm that I had never experienced before. When I finally reached the light, I found myself in front of a door made of pure light, bright and welcoming. I hesitated for a moment. A part of me, that skeptical and rational part, screamed that this couldn't be real. But another part, a part I didn't even know existed, pushed me to move forward. I took a deep breath, if that's possible when you're, well, dead, and walked through the door. What I saw on the other side, man, there are no words to describe it. It was a place of indescribable beauty. Colors I had never seen before, a peace so deep it seemed palpable. And there they were, two figures that, even though I never believed in them, I instantly recognized, Jesus and Mary. Don't ask me how I knew who they were. I just knew. Jesus had wounds on his hands and feet, and Mary wore a blue robe that seemed to be made of pure love. I stood there, paralyzed. All my years of skepticism, all the times I had scoffed at the idea of deities, it all flashed through my mind in an instant. And yet, I felt no judgment, just love. A love so intense, so pure, that it made me realize how small and limited my understanding of the universe had been until that moment. Jesus smiled at me, a smile that seemed to contain all the compassion in the world. And then he said, "I have always been with you, Ephraim, even if you didn't know it." Those words, man, they hit me like lightning. How could he have been with me if I never believed in him? How could you love me if I always denied him? At that moment, I realized how arrogant I had been to think I understood everything about the universe, how much I had lost by closing my mind to possibilities beyond what I could see or touch. There, in front of those divine figures, I, Ephraim Velasco, the skeptic, the man of science, felt small. But at the same time, I felt more alive than I had ever felt before, and I knew that whatever happened next, nothing would be the same as before. There I was, face to face with Jesus and Mary. I, who had always disbelieved in all of this, now found myself facing a reality that defied all my previous understanding. The initial shock gave way to intense curiosity. So many questions ran through my head at that moment. Finally, I found my voice. "Why?" I asked. "Why do so many people pray but their lives don't change?" It was a question I had heard so many times, used as an argument against the existence of God. Now, I had a chance to hear the answer directly from the source. Jesus looked at me with those eyes full of understanding and love. His voice was soft, but it carried a power I had never experienced before. "Prayer," he said, "is not about changing life's circumstances instantly. It is about finding inner peace to face difficulties with courage." He continued, "Suffering is not something I create. It exists because of human choices, but I am always here, alongside everyone, to offer strength." These words hit me deeply. All my life, I had seen suffering as proof of the non-existence of God. But there, at that moment, I began to understand that perhaps the issue was much more complex than I imagined. As I processed this, I felt a surge of love coming from Maria. She did not speak, but her gaze conveyed a compassion that seemed to embrace all humanity. It was as if she understood every pain, every joy, every moment of doubt that ever existed. Encouraged, I asked another question. "What about science?" My whole life I've believed it had all the answers. How can I reconcile what I've always believed with what I'm seeing now? Jesus smiled. Science, he said, is a wonderful tool for understanding the physical world. But the universe is far more vast and complex than can be measured in laboratories. Science and faith are not opposites. They are paths, different ways to understand the truth. I kept thinking about it. All my life I had seen science and faith as incompatible. But there, at that moment, I began to glimpse a much broader perspective. Suddenly, I felt a change in the environment. It was as if the air itself had become denser, more charged with meaning. Jesus looked at me with an intensity that made me shudder. Ephraim, he said, there is something you need to see. In the next instant, I was flooded with a vision. It was September 2024. The earth I knew was plunged into darkness like I had never seen before. Shadowy figures, tall and deformed, emerged from every corner of the planet. They spread destruction wherever they went, and I could feel people's fear and despair. But then, I saw something that filled me with hope. A legion of angels, bright and powerful, descended from the heavens. They moved in perfect formations like a divine army. Their swords were made of fire, and they were led by archangels whose light was almost blinding. The scene before me was of an epic battle. Light versus dark, good versus evil. It was as if the fate of humanity was at stake. I returned to the presence of Jesus and Mary, stunned by what I had just seen. What was that? I asked, my voice shaking. Jesus looked at me seriously. What you have seen, he said, is a spiritual battle to come. It is inevitable, but you must not fear. The light will always prevail, even if the path is difficult. I remained silent, trying to process it all. It was too much for my rational mind to comprehend. A part of me still wanted to deny it, find a logical explanation for all that. But another part, a part that was growing every moment, knew that what I was experiencing was real, more real than anything I had ever experienced. Why are you showing me this? I finally asked. Because you have a role to play, Ephraim, Jesus replied. Your journey does not end here. You will return, and you will take with you the knowledge of what you saw. Many will not believe you just as you did not before, but some will listen, and that will make a difference. I looked at Maria, and she nodded, her gaze full of encouragement. I realized that I was being entrusted with a mission that I could never have imagined. I, who had always scoffed at faith, was now being called to be a witness to the divine. It was scary and exciting at the same time. I knew my life would never be the same again, that I would never be the same again, and for the first time, I felt like I was ready to embrace this change, no matter how challenging it was. After the intensity of what I had just seen and heard, I felt emotionally exhausted. It was at that moment that the scenario around me began to change. The bright light that surrounded Jesus and Mary gently faded, and I found myself in a completely different place. It was a garden, but not an ordinary garden, you know? It was the kind of place you imagine when you think of paradise. The colors were more vivid than anything I had ever seen on earth. The flowers had a beauty that seemed almost impossible, each petal perfect in its shape and color. The air was fresh and sweet, filled with fragrances that I couldn't identify but that made me feel at peace. As I took in the beauty of that place, I noticed someone approaching. My heart skipped a beat when I recognized who it was. My grandfather, Santiago. You see, my grandfather died when I was a child. I was only 6 years old, and my memories of him are few and hazy. But there, in that garden, he was as alive and real as I was. The most surprising thing was how he looked. He was not the elderly, frail man of my vague memories. He seemed to be in the prime of his life, perhaps in his 40s, full of vitality and with a sparkle in his eyes that I had never seen before. Ephraim, my grandson, he exclaimed, opening his arms. Without hesitation, I ran to him and hugged him. It was a real, solid hug, full of love. I could feel the heat of your body, hear the beat of your heart. How was this possible? I didn't know, but at that moment, it didn't matter. Grandpa, I said, my voice cracking with emotion. I missed you so much. He pulled away a little, holding my shoulders and looking me in the eyes. His smile was exactly as I remembered, full of affection and a touch of mischief. I know, my son, he said. I missed you too. But know that I never stopped being with you. I watched you grow. I saw your struggles, your achievements. I'm so proud of the man you've become. His words hit me deeply. All my life I had dismissed the idea that our loved ones could watch us after death. Now here was my grandfather, telling me that he had been with me the whole time. We started walking through the garden, and my grandfather started talking. His voice was calm and full of wisdom. Ephraim, he said, I know your journey has not been easy. You have faced many challenges, many doubts. But I want you to know that this is all part of your growth. He paused for a moment, looking at a particularly beautiful flower before continuing. Always remember, what we cannot see is often more real than what we touch. The universe is vast and mysterious, and there is much more to it than meets our mortal eyes. I remained silent, absorbing his words. It was as if his every sentence was filling a void inside me that I didn't even know existed. Grandpa, I said finally, all my life I've believed only in what could be proven, what could be measured. How can I reconcile what I've always believed with what I'm experiencing now? He smiled, a smile full of understanding. My dear, he said, life is a journey of constant learning. What you believed yesterday need not limit what you can believe tomorrow. An open mind is the greatest gift we can give ourselves. We continued walking, and my grandfather gave me advice that would stay with me forever. He spoke about the importance of valuing the time we have, of taking care of our family, of always seeking love and kindness in all situations. And remember, he said, your mission on earth is not over yet. You will return, and you will take with you everything you learned here. Many will not understand, some will even mock. But don't let that discourage you. Every person that you touch with your story, every mind you open to new possibilities, will make all the difference. As he spoke, I felt a mix of emotions. There was a part of me that didn't want to leave that place, that wanted to stay there with my grandfather forever. But at the same time, I felt a new determination growing within me, a desire to go back and share everything I had experienced. My grandfather must have sensed my thoughts because he hugged me once again. Don't worry, he said. This is not goodbye. We will be together again one day. Until then, know that I will always be with you even if you can't see me. With those words, he began to walk away. I wanted to run after him, begged to stay a little longer. But something inside me knew it was time to leave. As my grandfather's figure disappeared into the bright light of the garden, I felt a deep peace wash over me. I knew I was about to go back to my life, to my body. But now, I would come back as a completely different person, a person who had glimpsed what exists beyond the veil of death and who had a mission to fulfill. The transition back into my body was, well, there are no words to adequately describe it. One moment I was in the heavenly garden saying goodbye to my grandfather, and the next I felt like I was being pulled by an invisible force. It was like falling off a cliff, but instead of fear, I felt a strange sense of purpose. Suddenly, I opened my eyes. I was back in my room, lying on my bed. The first thing I noticed was the silence. That persistent cough that had been my constant companion for the past few months was completely gone. I sat up in bed, panting, my body covered in sweat. I looked at the clock on the bedside table. It had only been a few hours since I had taken the medicine. A few hours. But it felt like I had lived an eternity. I brought my hands to my face, half expecting them to pass through my skin as if I were a ghost. But no. I was here, alive, breathing, and completely transformed. The reality of what I had experienced began to hit me in waves. Jesus, Mary, my grandfather, the vision of the future. It all seemed so real and so impossible at the same time. A part of me, That skeptical, rational part that had been dominant my entire life wanted to dismiss it all as a vivid dream, a hallucination caused by the medication. But I knew, deep down in my being, that what had happened was real, more real than anything I had ever experienced before. I got up from the bed on shaky legs and went to the window. Outside, the sun was rising, painting the sky with shades of pink and orange. The world seemed the same, but in my eyes, everything had changed. Every ray of sunlight, every leaf on the trees seemed to vibrate with an energy I had never noticed before. I stood there, watching the sunrise, letting the tears run freely down my face. Tears of joy, of gratitude, of astonishment. Tears for the man I was and the man I had become. At that moment, I made a decision. I wouldn't keep this experience to myself. I had been given a gift, a vision of what lies beyond this life, and I felt I had a responsibility to share it with the world. But how? How could I, Efrain Velasco, the convinced skeptic, tell people that I had died and come back? What had he talked to Jesus and Mary? That he had seen a cosmic battle coming? I knew it wouldn't be easy. I knew that many would call me crazy, that some friends would probably move away. My classmates at medical school would certainly question my sanity. And my parents, how would they react? But then I remembered my grandfather's words. An open mind is the greatest gift we can give ourselves. And from the words of Jesus, you have a role to play. I took a deep breath, feeling a new determination rise within me. Yes, it would be difficult. Yes, there would be challenges. But I had experienced something beyond this reality, something that had fundamentally changed who I was. And if sharing that experience could help even one person to see the world in a different way, to consider possibilities beyond the material, well, then it would be worth it. At that moment, I made another decision. I would continue my medical studies. But now my goal was no longer just to understand the human body. I wanted to explore the connection between the physical and the spiritual, between science and faith. I wanted to be a bridge between these two worlds that for so long I had seen as incompatible. I sat down at my desk and started writing. Every detail of my experience, every word exchanged, every sensation. I didn't know yet how or when I would share all of this, but I felt it was important to record it while it was fresh in my mind. As I wrote, I felt a deep peace wash over me. The same peace I had felt in the presence of Jesus and Mary, the same peace I had experienced in the garden with my grandfather. And along with that peace came certainty, a certainty that, no matter what happened from now on, I was not alone on this journey. The sun was already high in the sky when I finished writing. I heard movement in the hallway. My parents waking up, starting another day. Soon, I would have to face them. I would have to start navigating this new world I found myself in. A world where the visible and invisible intertwined in ways I had never imagined before. I closed my notebook and got up. It was time to start my new life. A life of purpose, of faith, and of a tireless pursuit of truth. Not just the truth that can be measured and quantified, but the greater truth that exists beyond the limits of our human understanding. I didn't know exactly what the future held, especially with the vision of 2024 weighing on my mind. But I knew one thing for sure. Nothing would be the same as before. And I was ready to face whatever came, with an open heart and a new understanding of the vast and wonderful mystery that is existence. The days following my near-death experience were, to say the least, surreal. It was like I was living in two worlds at the same time. On the one hand, there was the daily routine, waking up, having breakfast, going to college. On the other, there was this new internal reality, this expanded consciousness that I didn't know exactly how to process or express. The first person I told was my mother. I remember sitting at the kitchen table the next morning, spooning through my cereal, trying to find the right words. When I finally began to speak, the words came out in a torrent. I told everything, the darkness, the light, the encounter with Jesus and Mary, the conversation with my grandfather. My mother listened to me silently, her eyes widening as I continued my story. When I finished, there was a moment of silence that seemed to last an eternity. Then, to my surprise, she stood up, came around the table and hugged me tightly. "Ephraim," she said, her voice shaking a little, "I don't fully understand what happened to you, but I see in your eyes that something has changed, and if it has brought you peace, then I am happy." That moment with my mother gave me courage. I had the courage to tell my father, who reacted with a mixture of skepticism and curiosity. Courage to share with a few close friends, some of whom looked at me like I'd lost my mind, while others listened with fascination. In college, things were more complicated. I was known as the rational student, the one who always questioned, always asked for evidence. Now here I was, talking about experiences beyond death and visions of the future. Some teachers looked at me with concern, others with disappointment. I heard whispers in the hallways. I saw sideways glances. But surprisingly, I also found unexpected allies. A neurology professor approached me after a class and shared that she herself had had a similar experience years ago. A classmate, who I always considered a convinced materialist, confided in me that he had an uncle who went through something similar. It was during this period that I began to research more about near-death experiences. I read books, scientific articles, reports from other people. I found that although the experiences varied in detail, there were recurring patterns: the feeling of leaving the body, the tunnel of light, encounters with deceased loved ones or spiritual figures. This research helped me in two ways. First, it made me feel less alone. Knowing that other people had gone through similar experiences was comforting. Second, it gave me a language to talk about what had happened to me. I could discuss my experience not only in spiritual terms, but also in a more scientific context, talking about the possible neurological mechanisms involved. But not everything was easy. There were nights when I woke up in a panic, reliving the feeling of being lost in that absolute darkness. Other times I found myself questioning everything. Did it really happen? Was it just a very vivid dream, a hallucination caused by the medication? In these moments of doubt, I would go back to my notebook, reread what I had written that first morning, the intensity of the details, the clarity of the conversations, the depth of the emotions I had experienced. It all reminded me that what I had experienced was real. One of the hardest things to deal with was the vision I had received about September 2024. The idea of an imminent cosmic battle weighed on my mind. I constantly asked myself, should I tell people about this? How can I prepare someone for something so vast, so beyond everyday understanding? I decided for now to keep this part of my experience more private. I only shared it with my parents and a few very close friends. For the rest of the world, I focused on sharing the more universal lessons I had learned about love, compassion, the interconnectedness of all things. As the weeks went by, I started to notice subtle changes in myself. I became more patient, more compassionate. Things that used to irritate me now seemed trivial. I started meditating regularly, something I would have scoffed at before. And for the first time in my life, I began to explore different spiritual traditions, not to believe blindly, but to understand and appreciate the different ways that human beings have found to connect with the divine. My medical studies gained a new dimension. I became more interested in the mind-body connection, the way our spiritual beliefs and experiences can affect our physical health. I began to dream of a medical practice that could integrate the best of modern science with a more holistic understanding of the human being. As the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, I felt like I was slowly finding my footing in this new world. A world where the rational and the spiritual were not opposites but complementary parts of a reality greater and more complex than I had ever imagined. And through it all, there was a constant sense of anticipation, as if each day was a step towards something bigger, something that was beyond the horizon. I didn't know exactly what the future held, but for the first time in my life, I was truly open to all possibilities. As the months passed, the transformation that began with my near-death experience continued to unfold in ways I never could have predicted. It was as if each day brought a new revelation, a new challenge, a new opportunity for growth. One of the most significant changes was in my approach to studying medicine. Before, I saw the human body as a complex machine, something to be studied, dissected, and understood purely in mechanical terms. Now, I saw it as something much more. Every cell, every atom seemed to vibrate with an energy that went beyond the physical. I began to become interested in areas of medicine that I would have previously dismissed as pseudoscience. I studied the effects of meditation on the brain, the influence of emotional state on patient recovery, the power of placebo. Not that I've abandoned conventional science, far from it. But now I was looking for a synthesis, a way to unite the best of modern medicine with insights from older, more holistic traditions. This new perspective was not always well received at the college. I remember one class in particular where I expressed my opinion on the importance of considering patients' spiritual well-being. The teacher looked at me as if I had suggested treating cancer with rain dancing. Some colleagues laughed, others looked uncomfortable. But some, and this surprised me, came up to me afterwards, expressing that they too felt something was missing from the purely mechanical approach to modern medicine. Outside of college, I encountered both support and skepticism. I began participating in study groups on near-death experiences and other related phenomena. There, I met people who had gone through similar experiences to me, and for the first time I felt like I could talk openly about everything I had experienced without fear of judgment. But not everyone in my life was so open. Some friends walked away, clearly uncomfortable with my new perspective on life. Others tried to bring me back to reason, as if I had been the victim of some kind of brainwashing. These interactions were painful, but I understood them. After all, not so long ago, I would have reacted the same way. One of the biggest challenges I faced was dealing with the vision I had about September 2024. The knowledge of an impending spiritual battle weighed on me constantly. There were days when I woke up in a panic, worried about what was coming. Other days, I wondered if I should do more to warn people, to prepare them in some way. But how can we explain something so vast, so beyond everyday understanding? How can we talk about spiritual warfare without sounding like an apocalyptic fanatic? I decided to approach this in a more subtle way. Instead of preaching about the end times, I started talking about the importance of spiritual preparation, the need to cultivate inner strength and compassion. If a battle was truly coming, he believed these qualities would be more useful than any physical preparation. Here I am, sitting in my office, looking out the window at the Tampa sunset. It's August 2024, and September is just a few weeks away, the month that I believe will bring monumental change to the world. The emotions I feel are too complex to be easily described. There is anxiety, yes, but also a deep sense of peace and purpose. Looking back at the young skeptic I was before my near-death experience, I can hardly believe the journey I've been on. That Ephraim, so confident in his scientific materialism, seems almost like a stranger now. And yet, I am grateful to him. It was your tireless search for truth that prepared me to accept a greater reality when it revealed itself to me. My medical training is almost complete now, but the path I envision for my career is very different from what I originally imagined. I see myself not just as a doctor, but as a bridge builder, someone who works to bridge the worlds of science and spirituality, the physical and the metaphysical. The study and meditation groups I started in college grew and spread. Now, there are similar groups at universities and communities across the country. It's inspiring to see how a small seed planted can blossom in unexpected ways. As September approaches, I have noticed subtle changes around me. There's a tension in the air, a sense of anticipation that seems to affect even those who know nothing about my vision. The news is full of reports of unexplained phenomena, mysterious lights in the sky, mass spiritual experiences, events that challenge our current understanding of reality. Many look to me now, seeking guidance, seeking answers. I do the best I can to help, always remembering Jesus' words during my experience. Prayer is not about changing life's circumstances instantly. It is about finding inner peace to face difficulties with courage. I do not claim to be a prophet or a spiritual leader. I'm just someone who got a glimpse of something bigger and is trying to share what I learned. My message continues to be one of inner preparation, of cultivating spiritual strength and compassion. As for the battle I saw in my vision, the fight between light and dark, between angels and demons, I remain uncertain about how it will manifest in the physical world. Will it be a literal conflict, a spiritual war invisible to ordinary eyes, or a metaphor for the internal struggles each of us will face? Honestly, I don't know. But I believe that whatever form this battle takes, we will be better prepared to face it if we are united, centered on our inner strength, and open to the greater reality that surrounds us. There are days when the weight of this responsibility, this knowledge, seems overwhelming. In these moments, I turn to meditation, to prayer. I remember the unconditional love I felt in the presence of Jesus and Mary, the wisdom of my grandfather, and I find the strength to continue. As I watch the sun set, painting the sky with shades of orange and purple, I feel a rush of gratitude. Gratitude for the journey I've been on, for the people I've met along the way, for the opportunity to make a difference, even if in a small way. I don't know exactly what September will bring. I don't know how the world will change or what challenges we will face. But I do know this. The experience I've had, the vision of what lies beyond this life, has shown me that we are stronger, more resilient, and more connected than we ever imagined. So, as the world prepares to enter a new chapter, I prepare too. Not with fear, but with hope. Not with certainties, but with an open mind and heart. Because if I've learned anything throughout this journey, it's that the universe is much more vast, much more wonderful, and much more full of possibilities than we ever dreamed of. And so, with my heart full of expectation and my eyes turned to the horizon, I wait. I look forward to seeing how the next part of this incredible journey unfolds. Because in the end, I realize that my near-death experience was not an end, nor even a new beginning. It was simply one step on a much greater journey. A journey that all of us, all of humanity, are traveling together. Let September come. Let the future come. We are ready. Not because we know what's coming, but because we have learned to trust something bigger than ourselves. And in that trust, in that faith, we find our true strength.